This is a conflict that's unfolding at a dizzying pace. In just the last few hours, as you say, we've had confirmation of 3 American soldiers being killed, the first since this war began. There's also been deadly strikes in Iran, Israel and the Gulf states, as well as attacks in the crucial Strait of Hormuz. And whilst President Trump has said that he's willing to talk to Iran's leaders, for the moment, all sides seem prepared to escalate further. Prime Minister Netanyahu saying Israel's military strikes are going to intensify in the coming days.
The skyline of Tehran is choking with smoke as fresh Israeli and American airstrikes pound targets across Iran. The sheer scale of this assault is staggering. According to the Israeli military, more than 40 Iranian commanders have been killed, along with Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. For many young Iranians, the news triggered scenes of raw celebration late last night. To them, this moment felt like long-awaited revenge. Khamenei, after all, had overseen brutal crackdowns that left thousands of anti-government protesters dead in recent years. One woman, speaking anonymously, told us what she saw as the crowds reacted to the announcement.
I heard all this shouting outside the window, as if people had gone crazy. I got scared. I checked, and wow, they were shouting with joy. We couldn't sleep from the excitement.
But by morning, the streets told a different story. Supporters of the regime poured out in large numbers, staging a powerful show of loyalty and defiance. Despite heavy losses, Iran's clerical leadership does not appear ready to surrender power. In one community in southern Iran, the devastation is almost unbearable. Residents dig through shattered rubble with bare hands, searching desperately for the bodies of more than 100 victims believed to have died when a strike hit a nearby girls' school, just meters from a Revolutionary Guard compound. And the violence is not limited to Iran. In Israel, deadly attacks continue. Most Iranian missiles are intercepted by advanced air defense systems, but some still get through. In the center of Israel, at least 9 people were killed today. Several others remain missing. At another location in Tel Aviv, a woman lost her life during last night's attack.
The Iranians are clearly still able to penetrate Israel's air defense systems at times, but as of yet, it's not on a scale that's leading the Israelis or the Americans to reassess their calculations in this war.
As we stand here on the scene, the air raid sirens begin to wail once again. Moments later, powerful explosions echo overhead. The flashes in the sky mark incoming ballistic missiles being intercepted before they reach their targets.
They are targeting civilian neighborhoods.
Khamenei, the Iranian regime, have clearly done terrible things, particularly to their own people. But your prime minister is a wanted war criminal. You don't have the moral high ground here at all.
This is a war crime. This is a war crime. Targeting civilians, and the Iranian regime is targeting not only us in Israel, they are targeting the entire region.
What about the 100 or so schoolgirls in Iran that have been killed in a strike there?
And this must stop. This must be stopped, and this is what we're trying to do. Yes, next question, please.
But Iran's retaliation goes far beyond Israel. Across the Gulf region, Iranian drones and missiles are targeting American allies and military positions. At the same time, Iran has effectively shut down the Strait of Hormuz, one of the most critical shipping lanes for the global oil supply. In one dramatic incident, a tanker was struck during the escalating conflict. These moves appear designed to pressure the United States into ending the war before the Iranian regime collapses entirely. The firepower of the American military is overwhelming. Yet one enormous question hangs over the battlefield. How far is President Donald Trump willing to go? And how long can Iran's clerical rulers cling to power?
So what happens next? Iran's regime will have successors in mind for those key leadership roles that need to be filled. Could any of those new leaders countenance making a deal with the US on President Trump's terms, completely giving up all nuclear enrichment, for example? For now, it seems that they think that they can fight it out. But what the killing of the supreme leader does, I think, is underline just the extent to which American and Israeli intelligence have permeated the Iranian regime. Even as we speak right now, there are reports of further heavy airstrikes in Tehran.
Sek, thanks very much for joining us. Well, a day and a half after the launch of Operation Epic Fury, with the death of 3 US service personnel announced this afternoon, will President Trump, who said the campaign was moving along very well, keep his nerve and continue to order the American military to hit Iran with his promised unprecedented force? Our US editor, Anushka Astana, is in Washington now. Anushka, what's your answer to that?
Well, look, I think if you listen to what Donald Trump has said, it is clear that there are a couple of things that are not going to happen as a result of this. So Donald Trump was very clear from the start that what he does not want is a protracted operation here. He said it from the outset. He basically said, look, we've done our bit. Now it is over to you. But the second thing is what he's been saying today in phone calls to various American networks. He's spoken to the Atlantic magazine and he's given this suggestion that the Iranian leadership, the new leadership, would like to talk. He said to them they want to talk and I've agreed to talk. They should have done it sooner. Now, the White House have confirmed that that is what the Iranian leadership have suggested, but they have softened this a little bit, saying eventually the president wants to talk. But for now, Operation Epic Fury pushes on at pace. I do think, though, we get a glimpse of what the president is thinking in all of that he sees this in some ways as having echoes of what happened to Venezuela. Obviously, this is much bigger. The operation is much bigger than what we saw in Venezuela. But this idea that America comes in strong and hard for a relatively short campaign and then unleashes something that gives them their eventual goal. So the question is, what is their eventual goal? If it is regime change, then some people I've been speaking to, including Dr. Alan Mendoza, who's the executive director of the right-wing Henry Jackson Society, a very hawkish organisation, thinks that is possible because the regime has been weakened, but it would require the protesters, the opposition, to be armed. The second question is if what he wants is a better deal, particularly when it comes to the nuclear capabilities of Iran. And there are some suggestions that perhaps Donald Trump could get closer to that situation as a result of this, but it's all very high risk when it comes to Iran.
Anushka, thanks very much. Well, joining me now here in the studio is the Iran expert, Professor Ali Ansari. Professor, the Ayatollah, the supreme leader, is dead, but the regime clearly very much still alive and lashing out really across the Middle East.
I mean, it is. I think the word "lashing out" is about right. I mean, I think it's lashing out quite indiscriminately, and it's targeting many people who you would have thought it would have wanted to keep on board and sympathetic. So at the moment, it seems to have no real rhyme or reason other than to create massive disruption. Well,
so does that give Trump hope that they will come to a deal, and a much better deal than they might have done before this latest war began? You know, he says the new Iranian leadership is ready to talk. Might they capitulate?
I think if the Iranians succeed in provoking the Saudis and the UAE and others to actually come in with Trump, I think it's going to be a sort of a coalition of the willing that the Iranians have created against themselves. And it's something that I don't think they can really sustain in the long term. It really depends, I mean, how long Trump wants to go on. It also depends on what happens on the ground in Iran. But it's clear that the way the Iranians are lashing out, and they don't seem to have really a meaningful strategy in this other than really just to cause mayhem. But even that seems to be, I mean, the damage is not as dramatic as I think it certainly was in the 12-day war. So at the moment, all they've succeeded in doing is to build a coalition against themselves.
And I mean, how the American casualties will surely focus Trump's mind on getting some kind of deal in place early, won't it? Or has he just set the region on fire with sort of unforeseen consequences?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think he's already warned and he's sort of prepared people to say there will be some casualties. So I think obviously the threshold in the United States will be lower than it certainly is in Iran. But it's at the moment, as you know, you've indicated earlier, I don't think there's any indication that they want to slow down quite yet. So I mean, I think the damage that's being done, I think, to the Iranian sort of governmental infrastructure certainly and other things is pretty devastating at the moment.
Well, I mean, Trump was boasting about how many of the Iranian leadership he'd taken out in a single shot. What comes next? What might that betoken? The new supreme leader, might that be a change of tack from the Iranians?
There might be. I mean, I think also there are clear indications that they're losing a degree of command and control in Iran. I mean, Araghchi, the the foreign minister was up saying that one of the reasons that they happened to attack Oman, which was a very strange place to attack, I have to say, was that they didn't really have control, or they didn't have full control over their various military units, which is quite a shocking admission, actually. So there seems to be that, there's a certain element, one could say at the very least, that they're concussed in Iran. They're not quite sure what they're doing. And there may be voices, I think, within the system that are going to say that we simply can't go on like this.
Well, that betokens regime change.
In some ways, I mean, we could call it regime transition, to put it in a slightly more benign way. But certainly there may be elements in there that will say that, in order to protect what we've got, I think we ought to come to some sort of arrangement. I don't think that we're there yet, but I don't think it will be very long until we are there, to be honest.
Right. I suppose the question is regime transition, as you put it, to what? And is there any sign of the Iranian people rising up, as Trump urged them to do?
I think the chances that they will are fairly high, to be honest, as long as the campaign continues and as long as basically the repressive apparatus of the state is suppressed, and we're seeing that already. So as long as that happens, then the chances of a sort of a continued uprising, the next stage of what happened in January, for instance, is likely to happen again. We've already seen the students in universities protesting anyway, so it's already going on.
And do you think we're going to look back on this as a pivotal moment, a moment when the US and Israel between them reshaped the Middle East and possibly the world?
I think what is going to happen the next days and weeks is going to challenge a lot of assumptions. I think we're going to have to review a lot of the assumptions and a lot of the preconceptions that we had before we went in. There's clearly a certain amount of support for what's going on within Iran. And, as we've seen from the video, it's quite astonishing, really, in some ways. There are people cheering and clapping the military intervention. This is not what we were told we should expect, really, but it's happening.
Professor Ali Ansari, thank you very much for joining us. Well, here, the Defence Secretary John Healey has said that protecting British troops and civilians in the Middle East is his main concern, but he refused to be drawn on whether he thought the US and Israel's attacks on Iran were justified. Meanwhile, Iranians living in the UK have welcomed the blow to the regime. Many of them fled as dissidents. Anya Pop has this report.
For some Iranians, this moment feels almost unreal. In North London, news began spreading late last night that the man many blamed for decades of oppression and the deaths of tens of thousands of his own people might finally be gone. Soon, crowds gathered in the streets, waving Iran's pre-Islamic revolution flag. People danced, shouted, and celebrated after Israel, and later the United States, announced that Ayatollah Khamenei had been killed in earlier strikes. But inside Downing Street, the reaction was far more cautious. The British government appears determined to distance itself from the attacks. According to reports, the Attorney General believes the strikes could violate international law, and the government has refused to allow UK military bases to be used in the operation.
Would you have preferred it if this attack hadn't happened?
Well, the US is explaining its own actions and accounting for the basis on which it's done it. We played no part in those strikes yesterday, but make no mistake, we share that aim that Iran should never have a nuclear weapons program, and we share that assessment and that condemnation of a regime that for decades had murdered its own citizens, has exported terror including to the streets of Britain, and is now a very real and rising risk to UK civilians and military in the region.
Why won't you condemn these attacks if you're clearly not supporting them overtly either?
Because our full focus is on the defensive actions that we're taking, and all the actions that we take are fully lawful.
Even so, several politicians, including both conservatives and some reformists, have openly supported the US-Israeli campaign, criticizing the Labour government's stance. But a deeper question now echoes through political debates across the world. What happens when world leaders begin targeting and killing other world leaders?
In this case, I do not. This is a repressive regime that for years has been undermining us, our country, and threatening our allies. We'll have to see what happens in the days ahead. But this is really a moment for the Iranian people that have been fighting for their freedom for decades.
But there is a risk, isn't there, that this could get worse for the Iranian people rather than better?
Well, look, we don't know that, but any action comes with risk. That's absolutely a fact, it really is. But it doesn't mean that we should turn a blind eye to evil regimes like this.
we've seen what I would say is an illegal and unprovoked attack, and it's quite astounding that we have a Prime Minister that seems to be singularly incapable of standing up to Donald Trump and letting the UK stand on its own 2 feet. And I'm worried we're going to be pulled into another illegal war.
If President Trump had his way, he might have launched the attack from British military bases just like the one behind me. Instead, the British government now finds itself walking a fragile tightrope. On one side, there is growing pressure from allies and opposition parties. On the other, a wary public worried about being dragged into yet another Middle Eastern war.
Well, the new conflict in the Middle East comes just months after Donald Trump claimed to have obliterated Iran's nuclear program. One man who witnessed talks with both the Americans and the Iranians at the time is Ben Judah, a special advisor to David Lammy when he was Foreign Secretary, and he joins me now. Well, Ben, you were in the room where it happened when the US and Israel attacked Iran last year. That was over in 12 days. Is there a possibility that this time around it could be too?
I think the most important thing here to understand is that Britain has an America problem. And the problem is that the superpower we've built our entire security around has become profoundly erratic and tumultuous. Donald Trump won election on the promise of nothing less than world peace as the anti-war candidate, flanked by J.D. Vance, the great critic of interventionism. And look where we are now.
Yeah, and it's impossible to know how this pans out. I mean, could it be a very short war as it was last time? Or is that rather more complicated, do you think?
I think that we are on the verge of either a major capitulation from the Iranians or a major war. But the thing about conflict is it's so unpredictable. Like, no one in government, and certainly not me here, can act as a prophet in this situation.
Yeah. I'll come back to that unpredictable ally in a moment, but is Keir Starmer, given all of what you've just said, is he right to be cautious, or should he even be more outspokenly cautious, or really sort of taking on what the US has done? He's talked about the sort of legality of it, and he's talked about his fears of escalation. But should he be more outspoken now, do you think?
Well, the Prime Minister is kind of expertly trying to navigate the national interest at this moment. We see kind of two political answers to this right now in the world. You see what's happening is really the collapse of the rules-based order. And we see it all around this conflict, why neither the United States, Israel, nor Iran cares about that set of rules that tied politics together. You've got two answers, I see, for countries similar to our own. You've got a response from Sanchez, which is to stand up, the Spanish Premier, a more classic left-wing play, to go, I'm against the regime, but I'm against the war, and I defend the rules-based order, or what's left of it. And then you have a play from Carney, quite surprising to some people,
Canadian.
More up in Canada, where he's gone, actually, I think the war is in our national interest, and I am behind America, though quite far back.
But I mean, Keir Starmer's tried to sort of have it both ways, but he might have to be slightly more explicit. For example, if the war goes on and Donald Trump then has to use the UK-US base, Diego Garcia, what if Trump does that without, so far Keir Starmer's said no, but what if he does that without sort of asking permission? What then?
Well, this is our America problem, is we're so deeply tied in to the United States security system that when you go, as I've been to several of our bases in the Gulf, what these really are, if we're going to be honest, are British zones in or by American bases. Those are currently under attack. We saw a French base that was under attack earlier. We could very easily come under attack by the Iranians in the days and hours to come.
And then we're dragged into the war.
Absolutely. A war that we had no real role in planning, a war that we did not choose. This is what happens when you're so closely tied in to a superpower that's become erratic.
Well, and that erratic superpower, I mean, you wrote today, we have an America problem. How does that unpredictability of Trump and US policy play out for the UK? How have you witnessed that?
Well, I was once at a meeting in NATO, a sort of set-piece, quite formal meeting with Marco Rubio and foreign ministers and advisors sitting in the back, of course. And I saw Marco Rubio literally run out of the room to take a call from Donald Trump and then run back in with a completely different policy. But let me tell you, we don't only have an America problem. And this I thought the Prime Minister was quite good on at Davos in talking about. We have a European problem as well, is we're not in Europe really remotely ready for the collapse of the rules-based order. We're not working together enough. We haven't invested enough in defence, and we haven't built a strong enough pole in the world as Europeans.
Starmer's been clear that he wants to draw closer to the EU, but is this where we part ways with America?
I think the Prime Minister is absolutely right to want to pivot towards Europe. And I think that's where our national interest is. What we need to be doing right now is working much more closely with France and Germany. And I think they need a bit of British leadership in Europe at this current moment.
So pivot away from America?
I think that to a certain degree, yes, but nothing's easy in foreign policy and security policy. We're so deeply tied in and dependent, you can't just cut the cord.
Ben Judah, thanks very much for joining us. Well, while we've been on air, the British Ministry of Defence has announced that RAF fighters have been involved in what they said was a defensive action, shooting down an Iranian drone headed towards Qatar. So just what we were talking about there, with the UK becoming embroiled in this war.